Hello everyone. In this video I will tie a fly that represents a hatching midge in a very specific phase, with its back arched a little bit upwards to break free. The design is not mine. The design belongs to a man who unfortunately isn't with us anymore, Mr. George Bouvoin, and it's his design and the name it got after Bidwell Pond, where he used to fish in winter, and he observed that most of flies, which were in sizes 20 to 24, were stuck in the surface with their back arched upwards. So he thought that this shape may be a key to getting some more fish. He didn't. He said that this fly wasn't a miracle fly, but it worked when midges were around, and he was very satisfied with it. So he also observed that those midges, they have a mercury color of their body, so reflective body, and he wanted to imitate that with this silver mylar, and it's actually a midge that's trying to get rid of the shocks, so it still has air bubbles inside. It's struggling on the surface, and it's quite vulnerable phase of an insect, so that's why this fly is so effective. Fish, to be honest, may or may not target specifically this phase, but regardless, fly is very effective. The fly is obviously fairly simple. It has curved hook to get that curved arched back. Then it has a little bit of foam to aid buoyancy, but it's not enough. Just the foam is not enough. You need to have some hackle to support the fly as well. Now the fly is trimmed from beneath, as you can see, so this may imitate wings or legs, in both ways. I think it's smart to use a slightly oversized hackle or oversized hackle rather than to use the hackle that's appropriate for the size of the hook you're using, because midges, they have rather long legs and the wings are definitely longer than any proportion classic flies would suggest. So the curved shape of the hook is for achieving the goal of arched back. The silver mylar is to achieve the goal of the color that midges have. We have grizzly hackle here to imitate legs or wings here, and we have some foam to imitate insect that's struggling to get out, so this should be a body of an insect from beneath. For thread, I would suggest you to use any thread that's thin enough to tie a fly in the size you are aiming for, but it's very important that the thread can be flattened. Now, without any further ado, let's start with tying the fly. Start with a hooking device, and because I'm using a small hook and tying a small fly with a pretty slender shape, I want to preserve as many reps as possible, save as many reps as possible, and keep everything minimal. So I'll start with a reverse jam hitch. Lay your thread against the hook shank, and then from beneath and around the hook shank from above, go with your tag end. Now I'm using GSP, so I need to apply more wraps around the hook shank until I can just release everything, so I can transfer that. Oops, that's not enough wraps. I was just talking about that. So again, thread against the hook from around, and then make those wraps until you can actually pull on this and keep the tension all the time, because if you lose the tension, you'll lose the reverse jam hitch over here, as I just did. Now, after the tag end is secured, everything is safe, so you can use your hands freely. Yeah. Now, with flat thread, which is very important, it's one of the most important things for this fly. With flat thread, you want to continue tying the fly, especially tying in the foam, which I'm using a thin one, Evazote foam. I'm not sure, I think this is 1 or 2 millimeters thickness. Not sure, I got it from a friend, so I don't know what's on the package. It's closed cell foam, and I'm using this one because it matches the colors, and before the color. I mean, it's white, so I can color it in any color I want. The more importantly, it's soft, it's nice, and it's buoyant. I don't like that do-it-yourself foam from craft stores. Well, not as much as this one. Now, with flat thread that I was just saying, I want to prevent pressure from cutting the foam. So I'll just try to position the foam with less pressure on the top of the hook shank, and then I'll pull slightly on it. And with flat thread, as you can see, it's much easier. That's the second advantage here. It's much easier to cover up the body and prepare a flat foundation for what's coming next. Now I'm going to cover it a little bit more, but I need to flatten the thread again. The more flat thread, the more width it will have, and the more easier for you it will be to cover everything up. So I'm trying to cover this. I know on the screen it's much easier to see what's happening than actually in real life, because when you're tying small flies and when I start editing, I see so many mistakes that sometimes it's just like embarrassing, I think. Now, this is the arched look I was looking for. So I'm just gonna stop over here and go a little bit back. I'll tell you why. First, let's prepare some mylar. And mylar, I'm using this is some streamer material, as you can see. I just released all those ends, I let them loose. And now I'm gonna tie in by the tip. Now, because the mylar is quite slippery material and the thread is also slippery, obviously, it's GSP, I'm gonna just catch it by an angle like so, and then I'll apply a little bit more pressure and then secure it towards the front end where I want my hackle to be. Now let me see. Okay, this is too much. I need to catch it a little bit closer to the rear end. So I'll do 1 or 2 more wraps over here, and then I'll just proceed towards the front. Also, I'm trying to maintain very smooth body. Now I want to make the first wrap like so, and I'll just catch it around the foam. Okay, I'm trying to make as little bulk as possible. Now, touching wraps or slightly overlapping wraps of the mylar are what you're looking for here. Okay, and I'm applying a lot of pressure here because this mylar is quite durable. Now look at this. 1, keeping the pressure, very important. Now 2, and then I'll just do this 1, 2, 3, 4 to keep it from unwinding. Now I want to cut mylar over here, and look at this. I said 4, I think, so 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want this excess bulk, but I want to flatten the thread here and then cover up the mylar and prepare this area here for the feather. For the feather, I have to explain something to you, and I'll just skip to another frame. Now let's talk about feather. So this is a little bit bigger feather that I'm using, grizzly, and obviously for this fly I'm using the smaller one. And let's just talk about anatomy of the feather for a second. So the part that goes into the meat here is quill, then you have some fluffy part, then you have some webby part, and then you get into this usable part of the feather, which you should wrap around the hook. If you get into this portion lower portion. Obviously this fluffy part no one's going to use, but this webby portion many people will use just to save some feathers, and by actually doing that they're ruining their flies because the feather is not the same throughout the length. I'm gonna demonstrate that the way I saw it from one of the videos from Wayne Lou Allen on Global Fly Fisher website. You can find it on YouTube as well. He used a peacock feather, and so let me just repeat again. This part that goes into the meat, it's quill. This is the rachis. The thick part is the rachis, and then you have the barbs. So exactly the same anatomy as the feather I'm going to use for the fly. So it's just for the purpose of explaining here. It's bigger, it's easier to see. So you're not going to tie your fly by tying in the feather over here or even over here. You want to skip that part because the rachis here, look at the shape of it. It's circle. So the more circle the rachis, the more unpredictable is going to be how it's going to lay over the hook. You cannot control the circle. The circle will just roll all over the hook shank. Now, if you get into this webby part, it's still oval, almost circle. So again, unpredictable, plus you have web part, which is not very desirable here. Now, look what happens if you go up towards the tip. The rachis becomes more ovoid, and I'm going to demonstrate that here, and I'm going to show you a drawing which will explain everything here. So I don't know how much you can see in the video, but like it's almost like a rectangle in shape over here. So that's why this flat sides up and down that are holding those barbs, they tend to lay over the hook. This side is round, so it's always going to fall down onto the flat side. Now let me try to illustrate that a little bit more with the paper that I just drew. So the part that's near the quill is round, unpredictable, so the barbs are actually going to lie down in a very unpredictable manner. Now the one at the upper part of the feather, which is more, as I said, ovoid, tends to lay on this upper edges or lower edges where the barbs are positioned. So that's why the feather will lie perpendicular to the hook shank, like so. And that's very important for tying of the fly. Now, if that's clear, let's just jump into tying of the fly. So I'll just do what I just told you. So I'll skip the fluffy part, I'll skip the webby part, and I'll go into the thin rachis here, break off the feather. Then very important part is to remove a little bit of barbs from the feather, but as you can see it's asymmetrical here, and I'll make it even more obvious, like so. What's happening? Okay, so I have couple of barbs that are going towards me. There are more and less on the side that's going towards the screen. So counter spin the bobbin to catch the feather, and I'm going to put the feather on the side of the hook. Now first two wraps here are relatively soft. I don't want to cut the foam, and then when I get here I'm gonna apply a little bit more pressure, and that's it. Now flat thread again, I'm going back. Flat base is very important because if you don't have flat base, the feather is going to go zigzag and you're going to have difficulties with wrapping the hackle. Now just lift your feather upwards, and then look what happens. Because I removed the barbs from the rachis, the first part of the wrap is going to go on the naked rachis, so there is not going to be any barbs sticking away backwards, which is not desirable. Yeah. Now every wrap should go in front of the previous wrap. I'm trying to do this to wrap this hackle densely, like each wrap goes in front of the previous one, and sorry, one more, that's it. Now I have to be careful now. I have to compensate, so I have to catch the feather with 1 or 2 wraps, and then I have to transfer everything in front of the foam. Now I can apply some pressure over here. Now I'll cut the feather, but I'm not gonna cut it like so. I'm just gonna push the scissors over the rachis, and then my friend would suggest me to do the hand whip finish here. But honestly, I'm not super comfortable doing hand whip finish on such a small fly yet, so I'll just do my usual whip finish tool. So look at this, I'm just gonna hold back everything, and then I'm going to do whip finish towards the eye, cover the eye a little bit, but then I'm gonna tighten everything backwards, which will in return remove those wraps from the eye. Okay, now time to cut the rear foam. Let me do it like so. Then I'm gonna cut those edges, make them a little bit softer. I'll do the same here, but I'm gonna make it a slightly longer than the back one. And the final touch. I need to cut from beneath, but instead of doing just this, I'll go from the side, and I'll do it with one cut probably. Okay, let me check this. Pretty good. Okay, now that's it. Now, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, this from beneath can look like some legs, some wings. It can look like anything. It's not necessarily legs, as people are saying. In my opinion, this more looks like wings than anything else. The most important part is that this will hold your fly on the surface because of the surface tension. Now let's talk about fishing the fly. Obviously, midges most of the time would hatch, well, they hatch all year round, but in winter where nothing is hatching, you can get some good fishing with midges. Because the fish is in the slower part of the river, this will be the best solution instead of some bulky fly, but you have to fish it properly. Fishing small flies requires delicate presentation, which means longer leaders, longer tippets, and what that gets to you is like more drag-free drift and softer presentation. I'm not going to go into the details, but just use as thin tippet as you can, because sometimes you have bigger fish, so you cannot use just like 7x or 6x or whatever you want to use for midges. You have to use something stronger, but just use as thin tippet as you can and as long tippet as you can handle. That's very important, because if you cannot handle the long leader and tippet, like, just don't use it, because presentation is most of the time the key. You got the fly, now you need to get the right presentation. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and see you next week.